Hey everybody, welcome to the Kickstarter preview for Dubai Rebuild the Ruins. Now this is a new game coming out from Greater Than Games, and it's just like the title says. It's set in the far future. There's been some kind of apocalypse that's wiped out a lot of the earth. Folks have started to try to rebuild and regenerate civilization, and this takes place in Dubai, and you'll be sort of piloting one of the factions trying to have the most influence, build various different types of buildings on the board, which will unlock special abilities and kind of kick in your engine building. So it's got a lot of very, I would call them Euro components. You've got some bidding, you've got some area control, kind of tile placement, adjacency kind of things. And the main sort of mechanism of the game is difficult to explain because I've not seen anything quite like it, but I would sort of glibly call it kind of three interlocking Mancala kind of thing. It's sort of reminiscent of some of the winsome mechanics if you played some of those kind of economic train games, but it's not super complex like some of those can be. But it's very interesting in terms of how the turn order is affected and how you kind of drive the pace of the game with that main mechanism. So let's jump in and look at it. And I don't have a box or anything to show you. I will show you just kind of the back of one of these goal cards. You can get these various goal cards in the game, and you can see kind of a in progress rebuilding of the ruins of what you might think as modern Dubai there. So that gives you kind of a flavor of the theme there. So let's jump down and take a look at how the mechanics and everything works, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. Okay, here you can see the components of the game, and again, this is a prototype, so this is not final art or final components. First, you can notice here we've got kind of the main game board. And here players will be putting out various tiles, and there's different types of tiles here. So we can see here is a business tile. Here's the kind of resources it will take, and a little bit of an icon there for the type of building and some cool artwork there. So these are going to be going out here on the board, and you're going to kind of building them out adjacent to your headquarters. You can see this kind of sigil, this emblem here, here, and here, and players will start with a headquarters on one of those spots and then kind of spread their little network out. Now you can see kind of the different shading here. So this main area here, that's not part of the red or yellow shading area, that would be in a 2-player game. In a 3-player game, you'll extend the board here and add this shaded area, and then a 4-player game, of course, then you're going to use the whole board. Now the other thing to notice on this board are these 3 action spaces, and this is kind of that interlocking worker placement Mancala thing that I talked about in the intro. But first let's jump over to the player pieces over here. Now you can see a few things. We've got pieces in different player colors, and these line up with different faction boards as well as shields here. And so players will put their goods and resources here behind this, and this will also give you an overview of the 3 different action spaces and what you can do there. Now there are 5 factions in the game, even though it only plays up to 4 players, so you'll have some variety that you can choose from. Now if you look here on the board, this is the white player, this is the Hazimin faction, and you can see there's a special ability that they have. So this is rebuild 1 structure for free at the beginning of the game. So this faction here will actually start with a structure right on their headquarters. Now these boards here are double-sided, so I took this one here, Maxur, you can see this. This has 1 special ability on this side, buy +1 resource of a different type at the port when you take that action. Now each of these also has a side that has 2 completely different special abilities. So before you play the game, you can decide, are we going to play with the 1 special ability or play with the 2, and everybody will flip the board to the side there. Now you can also see entertainment, business, residence, bazaar, factory, and so on. These are the different types of buildings that you can build, and then once you start to build these, you'll take tokens off of here that you can see here, and this is going to give you special abilities to affect all the actions that you do in the game. So as you uncover these, you can think of it like an engine building thing, where if I take, let's say this one here, the factory. I build a factory, that means I can buy +1 resource of the same type at the port. If I build another factory, I'd be able to do this a second time. So it's going to get better and better and better as you uncover these and then build these different types of buildings. And you can see you can have tokens here to mark that. So as I built an entertainment building, I'll take that token there and then take the building and then mark it with my token there to show I own it, and then I've now unlocked a level of that. Now you've also got here 4 workers, which I'll show you how to use in just a second. And you'll have 4 sort of bidding tokens, which is very interesting. I'll explain that. And then you've got 1 other token here, and I think this is just acting as a placeholder for the prototype, but this one will mark your starting space or your headquarters. Now for setup, I can see I'm partway through setup here. Now one thing you're going to notice here is you see these little icons on these spaces here. You're going to roll a d6, and there's just a little chart that corresponds to one of these types, and I rolled sand. And then you're going to flip tiles off the top of the stack here and look at the top resource, and then put that resource out for each tile that you flip on all the different sand spaces. So it kind of randomly seeds some resources out there for folks to get in a random sort of configuration. Then you'll shuffle those tiles back in. And then players will then choose the headquarter locations. And I went ahead and just put out a little starting building here for the Hazmin faction there, so that you can see they've started with that building. And it's also worth noting that each player will get one goal card to start the game, and these are a variety of different things. So you can see at the end of the game, if you control 4 structures in a row, then you'll score this one. Some of them will be during the game, so rebuild on all lands surrounding your HQ, and then that will be completed. You can do that, of course, anytime during the game. At the end of the game, you're going to take and mark any that you've completed, subtract from that the number that you haven't completed, and you'll score a certain amount of points, which I'll show you. But you start with one of those, and you'll have this initial market here seeded with the tiles. You can see the cost kind of gets higher as these go up here, and as you buy these, they'll start to fill in. You also will deal 4 of these to each player, and they will get resources sort of seeded by the top resource marked on each of these to start with, and they'll be able to choose one of these, and they'll put that out in front of them, so this is sort of in queue to be built, and then they will shuffle the rest back in here. And the last thing to note for setup is that each player will start with 15 money there, and then we're now going to go into the point where we're going to deploy our workers. So there's basically 2 ways that you can set up the workers here. The game gives you a sort of a fixed configuration based on the number of players, and I would definitely recommend that you start the game with that. So if you have 2 players, 1 player will be here and 1 player will be there, and then the others will be staggered. But after you play the game, then you can kind of go into sort of like a drafting type of thing, where you put workers out. Now you'll have to put a worker out on a different space. So if white went here, and then it got back around to them to place a worker, they couldn't put it on the same place until they put it on another spot, and then another spot, and then your last worker can go anywhere. Now after all the players have placed the workers, then whoever was the first player will pull one of those workers off of here, anyone that they wish, and then this will be the one that they're going to place out on here, and that'll start the game. And the round consists of placing the worker at the back of one of these tracks here, kind of going in this direction. So you're always placing back along this way. And then you're going to activate the workers going back the opposite direction. So if white wanted to go to the port, they would go here, and then we would do the port action, and we would resolve that for all of the players that had workers on here, but it's going to resolve a little bit differently in each of these places. But after we do that, then whoever's at the tail end here will get their worker. So blue will get theirs, and then they will immediately go, so they could place here. So what's going to happen is, let's say white did this one. Let's say they placed there, we'd resolve the ruin space, and then white would get their worker back, and they'd immediately get another turn. So turn order is very, very fluid, and how these workers start to fill out is going to really be a big part of the game, and sort of strategizing and choosing and how everybody's sort of placed out. Now there's one thing to kind of note before we talk about the specifics of each of the different actions. When we go to the port, everybody's going to be involved. Everybody's going to do a bid or possibly get some money. If we go to the engineering guild, then each player that is here will be able to take one of 2 actions, and you're going to go kind of, like I said, back in this order. But once blue does their thing, then blue won't go again. But when you go to the ruins, it's going to be based on each worker that's there. So white places here, white does something, then blue, then green, then red, then white again. So each of these spaces work a little bit differently. Now if you don't have a worker in that particular place, you can press a worker into service. You can take a worker from somewhere else and move it over if you really want to be involved with that, but you've got to pay $3 to be involved with that. So it's a little bit tricky. You're going to spend a little bit extra money to do whatever you wanted to do, but you can do that. And you move one over, let's say blue moved over, and then we'd fill the workers in like that. So that's kind of the gist of the general worker placement. Now let's talk about each of the specific spots, starting with the port and then working this way. So this is one of the main ways that you're going to start to collect resources here at the port. You can see everyone will bid for resources, or you take 2 dirham or $2 per worker. Now the way that the bidding works is, for each worker that you have here, you can take then and you put one of your 4 bidding tokens for each worker. So white here would get 1, the red could take 2, and green would take 2. Now you don't have to. You could choose to take none. And everybody's going to take whatever they have, 0 to the number of workers that they have, and they're going to close their fist and then simultaneously bid. Now what that's going to do is that's going to set the cost for the resource. Now whoever triggered this is going to name the resource. And for the prototype here, we've just got these different discs here that match up to different resources. So maybe I'll say orange. And so we would all know that we're bidding to actually collect orange. Now the full price of that is going to be the total number of tokens that were bid. So let's just say it was something like this here. And so white bid 2, red bid 1, and green bid 1. So the total price is $4, but you can buy up to the amount that you bid. So white could buy 2 for 8, and then red could buy 1 for 4, and green could buy 1 for 4. So again, the total price is the collective that everybody bid, and you can actually buy the number equal to the amount that you contributed. If not, you take, again, $2 per worker, so you do get something out of it. And if for some reason the cost goes above what you can actually pay, then you'll remove your bid tokens and it'll reset the price to whatever is left, and you can take the $2 per worker at that point. So that's the main way to get resources. And the reason that you're trying to get resources there is you can see the cost here to actually construct and rebuild these different locations here. It costs you a certain number of resources. And there's going to be either 3 to 5 resources in varying configurations there. Now moving over to the Engineers Guild, and this is going to tell us how we actually acquire new tiles. You can do one of 2 actions. Now after, let's say for fun here, green goes over here. So they're going to trigger this, and then working again left to right, green will get the first option. They can either do project finance, and that's just get $7, or they can purchase a tile. And then blue would go, but because green already went, they wouldn't go again, and blue wouldn't go again, and then white would go, and then red would go. So you decide, okay, I'm going to take $7, or I'm going to purchase one of the tiles. And that's very simple. You pick one of the tiles here. Let's say I wanted to go buy this one for $8. I'd buy that. The next player would go, but not until everybody's gone would you then refill and replenish this row here. Now this is one of the ways that the game will end, is if you don't have enough tiles to refill that completely, and then that'll be a trigger for the end game. And then you'll take the tile that you purchased again and put it with any others there in front of your screen, but you're showing that you've kind of queued this up to be able to build it by paying the resource cost here. So the next spot here would be the ruins, and so going from our previous example, green went here, triggered this, so that means red would get theirs back. They would then go here to the ruins, and you can do one of 3 things, but per each worker. So in this case, you can do a few things. You can take or trash a goal card. So I can take a new goal card, I get this, have the most remaining cement, that's a type of resource at the end of the game, and then you'll have fulfilled that goal. Now you can also discard a goal card. If you get one that you don't like, it's going to be hard to complete. For one of the actions that you do here, you can actually get rid of them, because remember, the ones that you do not complete are going to hurt you at the end of the game. And the other thing you can do is trade resources. Any 2 resources, you can get a single resource back, or you can actually build a structure. So if you have a structure in front of you, then you can pay the resource cost there, and you put the structure out. Now before I show you how to do this, one thing to note is the other trigger for the end game, white's going to get their pawn back, they're going to go, is once you fill these up, and then boom, once you place a worker there, that will also trigger the end game there as well. So that game's going to end one of 2 ways. Once you've done this ruins action enough times, or we've run through the deck of these and can't replenish the market, that will trigger the end game, and then you'll score. But I'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. So let's talk about what happens when you actually build the structure again. Now let's say red took the opportunity to build a structure. You can see their HQ started up here, and they can build adjacent to where they are. Now you can see this spot here was seeded with a resource. So what that means is, we'll take a look here, and you can see I'll need a red, a green, and a purple resource there, and one of these is red. So I can actually use this resource as the cost. So I can just play the purple and the green and put that there, and then I'll mark with one of these on the board there, like that. Or you can just take the resource there if it's not required in the building. But you can sort of plan to get to a certain spot and then use the resource that was on the board already to do that. Now I've marked this, and I can now start building adjacent to either my headquarters or pre-existing buildings that I own. But in this case, we built a factory. And just pretending we're the white player a minute, you'll take that token off of the factory. You've got 4 tokens on each of these. And now I've sort of unlocked the greater potential. Every time I build factories, I'll be able to then buy +1 resource of the same type at the port. Because remember, you can buy up to the amount you contributed here at the port. So remember, the total cost is all of the tokens, but I can only buy up to 2. Well, now I can like maybe just put 1 in, but I can buy an extra one, so I can buy more for cheaper by kind of, you know, sort of spinning them up and dovetailing. Or if I built the entertainment here, it's +2 dirham when you take income at the port. So instead of taking 2 income per worker, I would be taking 2 times the number of workers plus an additional 2 for each one of these entertainments that I've built there. And so on. Each of these all kind of dovetail with the different actions that you can do on the board. So you can kind of really sort of pursue almost like a little technology path with the types of buildings that you build, and getting more resources or more money quicker, or even getting resources when you buy structures, or you can build more structures and so on. And a lot of these special abilities here will have that same kind of thing. So this whole thing here is really about the engine building. Now, the last thing to note when you build a building is you're going to get points equal to the number of resources you spent. So anything that has 3 resources will give you 3 points. If you build a big one like this, it takes 5, then you'll get 5 points. And you just move your markers down here on the score track. Now, at the end of the game, you're going to get points for a few different things. You get 10 points if you have 1 structure of the 5 different types. So if you get 1 of each at least, then you'll get 10 points. You'll get 5 points for each row that's 3 or more. So if I built like this, let's say the white player had built this, they would get 5 points for that. Now you can also use the same one if you go, because you can do vertical or horizontal. So that would be 5, 10 for that as well. Now you're also going to get points for the sort of the types and how they're adjacent. So if you look here on the player mats, this is kind of interesting here. So you can see this sort of circular thing. So entertainment is next to factories, next to bazaar, and so on. So because I have entertainment next to factory, and they're adjacent here, I would get a point. You'd also get a point for, if I zoom up here a little bit, these here, so factory is adjacent to factory. So if it's also the same type, you would get a point. So I'd get a point here, entertainment is next to factory, and then factory is next to bazaar there. So that's gonna, the sort of synergy bonus, if you will, you're gonna get 1 point for each of those that it's adjacent to. And then you're going to score your goal cards. So let's say, pretend that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I completed and 2 that I didn't complete. So you're going to kind of take the net of that. So I completed 3. And then you're going to score points here, basically according to this chart here. So a total of 3, that'd be an extra 6 points, because you take the completed minus the uncompleted, and then that's what you get there. Oh, and then lastly, you're going to get 1 point for every 10 bucks that you have at the end of the game. And that is it. Okay, so that is Dubai. The first thing I want to talk about is a player count, because typically with this kind of game, you wouldn't really expect it to work well with 2, and this actually does very much. Now, I've only played it with 2 and 3 players. I haven't had a chance to play it with 4 players yet, but it worked great at both of those counts. And I think a lot of that has to do with the board's kind of, sizes to, the number of players. So the amount of contesting that you're going to have, you're going to be vying for those spaces relatively quickly. As the tiles start going down, the area gets gobbled up pretty quick. And so you're trying to, again, get all those kind of synergy bonuses that I talked about there at the end with the scoring, get 3 in a row and all that kind of good stuff. So that space gets gobbled up pretty quick. And the thing that kind of surprised me that it worked so well 2-player was there's like a bidding aspect, but it's a really different kind of bidding, because you've always got those 4 tokens, and depending on the amount of workers and sort of the amount of focus that you're putting over there, you're going to be able to use more or less of those, but you can also kind of take the opportunity, especially as you start to unlock a lot of the special abilities, to really watch your opponent or your opponents and see when they're in a situation where they're not going to be able to get a whole lot of resources out of it, and either they're low on money or they don't really have very many workers over there, or you can pick a resource that they really don't need, and maybe they've got a lot of the purple resources, but you need it to build some of your buildings. So you can be very, very watchful in that sense, and then go over there and kind of make those opportunistic sort of strikes at each of the different locations there. And so with the 2-player game, you're you're able to really watch your opponent and see what they're going to build, because it's pretty manageable in terms of, you know, saying, okay, they probably want to buy this building here because that's going to give them a bonus, and I can see they're kind of trying to unlock maybe the entertainment bonus so they can get tons of extra money, even when they don't have something to bid on. So you can really watch that and sort of play off of that. And the game gets really, really fun because at the beginning you get a couple things, you get a couple resources, you put some buildings out, but then as you put the buildings out again, you start to pull off those tokens off of the player board, and then you've got a little engine going, and you're getting more money, you're getting more resources, you're able to get resources when you build stuff. So it really kind of spirals up, and that makes it very, very fun. And the whole like sort of weird turn order, worker placement, Mancala stuff is also very interesting. I've not really seen something quite like that. It kind of reminds me of a game kind of like Chicago Express or something, but not really. It doesn't really fit that, but it does kind of fit with that sort of winsome-y German train game kind of thing, where you have this, you know, pretty basic structured, you know, certain kind of paths to scoring that you can go and sort of very economic and stuff. And then you have this kind of weird turn order mechanism that just kind of really throws you for a loop. And you're really trying to like kind of optimize that. In German Railways is another one, Chicago Express. It's like a real kind of basic game here that you can sort of manage, but then it just really plays with kind of the order of operations that you're used to. And that's really, really interesting. And it has a lot of those sort of hallmarks of kind of your more traditional modern Euros, with how you can manage the goal cards. And it's a lot of, I don't know if you call it opportunity or the risk management kind of thing, where you're looking at, you know, how quickly can I get this factory down? You know, because I've got spaces running out, but I really want to get this here because it's going to give me a little bit of synergy. It's going to add to my engine. I've got these gold cards in my hand. How does it kind of play off of that? And then you kind of watching what all the other players are doing. And you've got the special abilities again that each of the different factions has. So I like it's got this basic thing. You do one of three things. You go to the port, you get resources, you go to the engineers guild to get a new sort of project or blueprint that you want to put up, or you go actually do that. But if you can't do anything, like, you know, somebody calls port and you're like, oh, I can't get anything. Well, you still get kind of like a recompense off of that. So, and you can also like turn that sort of consolation prize into your engine too. So it's got a lot of interesting things going on that way. The theme is interesting because this type of game usually would be, I don't know, would be a less interesting theme, but this is post-apocalyptic futuristic Dubai. That's just not a theme that you see all the time. So it makes for some very interesting artwork. Now this is all sort of prototype artwork, but some of this stuff looks pretty finished there. And, you know, you've got this kind of thing. So I think the final production will be a very interesting game to look at. You know, it won't just be like generic, you know, gentrified, overly polished, you know, city building, or, you know, it will have a little bit different flavor, aesthetic, and artwork and stuff like that. We can kind of look at the back here with the shields. So it's going to have a different aesthetic too. I think that, and that's going to be nice. And it's post-apocalyptic too, so that's automatically cool. So if you look at that there, and you can see kind of the greenery and the overgrown, you know, lack of human folks around helping that stuff. So I definitely take a look at this, take a look at the Kickstarter. There'll be links and stuff below. But this is a very surprisingly fun game, and, you know, a very good notch in its belt is that it plays so well at the different player counts, because this type of game, in my experience, doesn't usually play, you know, that hot with two players. Anyway, so that is Dubai. Thanks.